Greetings, and welcome to this series of seminars presented by the International Gnostic Movement. In this first conference, we will explain what Gnosis is, theoretically and practically, while at the same time giving a brief overview of certain subjects that we will discuss in the following seminars. Let us begin by defining Gnosis. By studying the history of humanity, we can become aware of the fact that throughout time, there has always existed three types of knowledge. A common knowledge, so to speak, that pertains to daily things and the different jobs that relate to it. Then a second knowledge of an intellectual nature that we find principally in school and in university. Finally, there is a third type of knowledge, and this one is of a metaphysical order that we call Gnosis. Though the first two types of knowledge hold a great deal of importance in daily life, we know well that they do not answer the eternal philosophical questions. Who am I? Where do I come from, and where do I go? Is there a goal to my life? The word gnosis is of Greek origin and means superior knowledge or wisdom. Being global in nature, gnosis studies the creation, the first principles, the hidden causes, the workings of the universe, of the human being, of nature, etc. Not only does gnosis seek to discover reality, but it also studies the mystical experience that leads to this reality. It is what gives to this knowledge a metaphysical, psychological, and anthropological weight. Historically speaking, though there is a Gnostic thread within the primitive Christian Church, Gnosis has also always existed at the heart of the great cultures and religions of the world. It therefore predates ancient Greece, even if its actual name dates back to that epoch. The origin of Gnosis is unknown, due to the fact that it does not belong to any one culture or people in particular. As we understand it, Gnosis is constituted of the sum of human experiences that span across time, certain people having contributed more than others. Supported by diverse historical and anthropological research, it is the uniqueness of this knowledge that has brought the modern adepts of Gnosis, as well as numerous seekers, to affirm that, despite a mythological and artistic symbolism that is presented in diverse forms, all the ancient cultures and great civilizations, with their diverse religions and philosophies, have arrived at a common body of doctrine. We can give the Pythagorean school as an example, where mathematics, astronomy, poetry, philosophy, music, and the law of octaves were taught as parts of a greater whole, integrating the human microcosm within the universal macrocosm, as well as uniting the sciences, arts, philosophy, and mysticism. We can therefore say that Gnosis is a practical philosophy that can be applied to daily life, retransmitted through the arts, and that uses the direct mystical experience, according to scientific methods, to investigate and live the universal principles. This global knowledge has never been solely theoretical, but has always invited its adepts to unite theory and practice. According to the doctrine's precepts, there exists a material world and a spiritual world. The duality of good and evil at the core of the material world is but one of many manifestations of this reality. The human soul, when placed between matter and spirit, has the possibility to regenerate via the studying and knowledge of the self, thus permitting the efflorescence of one's superior nature, or awakening. According to the ancient peoples, this transformation, brought upon by the psychic purification of the individual, naturally leads to his or her spiritual elevation, and, by consequence, the birth of their latent faculties and direct experience of reality, or revelation. Throughout the ages, a large number of animist, mystic, and religious currents have attempted to keep this so-called ancient torch of wisdom alive. During the Middle Ages, it also took the form of many different fields of study, including Kabbalism, the multidimensional structure of the human and universal cosmoses, alchemy, the higher study of chemical principles and their mutations within the human body and nature, and contemporary astrology. It is within numerous varied orders and fraternities that these themes, as well as others, have been studied in depth and passed on. We will go into depth on a number of these themes in the seminars that follow. Finally, what we know today as parapsychology, esotericism, spiritualism, traditional medicine, and naturopathy, the study of dreams and astral projection, the cosmic sciences, martial arts, meditation, yoga, and all the teachings that we can find in these modern schools are extensions of this ancient tradition known as Gnosis, and that we will integrally retransmit. Let us talk now a bit about religion. Since the dawn of antiquity and throughout our history, the human being has sought the divine within himself, within nature and within all of creation. He has sought to connect with something indescribable, invisible, because at the core of his devotion, the human being has always sensed that something greater exists, something that merits his wonder and even his veneration. Thus, the great religions were born, generally after the passing of exceptional beings that instructed humanity. Unique books were written and marvelous temples erected, sanctuaries of peace and prayer. The great Greek philosophers, the Egyptian hierophants, the Amerindian shamans, the Hindu mystics, the Asian sages, the African animists, the Zoroastrian mages, the Nordic druids. Such a multitude of great beings belonged to the grand civilizations of history. Many temples and sanctuaries still resonate with the echoes of their wisdom to this day. There is a multitude of beautiful and grand truths in Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Sufism, Judaism, and Buddhism. So many truths similar to those of the ancient and forgotten religions. Peace and fraternity between the many members of all religions. This is what all true religions have taught, and it is also what Gnosis has always advocated, not only due to the fact that tolerance and love of one's neighbor have always been at the heart of the messages of the great beings, but also because of the unique nature of knowledge, the universality of wisdom. Gnosis does not seek to convert anyone. It seeks rather to unite all human beings of a noble and pure heart, first by teaching what is common among the great religions, past and present, and then by permitting each individual to deepen their experience with their own religion, to go further on their own path, unveiling what was lost, because time and ignorance have erased what Gnosis brings back into the light of day. Each religion is a pearl on the necklace of the Creator. Here are some common points that the sincere seeker could easily recognize if they deepen their studies and their direct experience of the great currents of modern religious thought. The intrinsic duality of the human being. On one side, qualities, and on the other, defects, and the work on oneself to become a better person. The belief in the existence of superior and pure entities, whether they are called angels, gods, devas, Elohim, or spirits, and the belief in the existence of awakened men and women known as masters, prophets, saints, gurus, guides, Buddhas, or illuminated ones. The possibility of perfecting oneself, of getting closer to these exceptional beings and the divine. The belief in a supreme creator, God, Allah, Brahman, the Absolute, Elohim, Amun, the One, the Unknowable, etc., and in his divine feminine counterpart, Mary, Maya, Isis, Kuan Yin, Shakti, and so on. Charity, sharing, compassion, love. Humanity as one big family. It is not by chance that these basic principles, among many others, are recognized by the adepts of all creeds, because Gnosis is a very natural functionalism of the consciousness. The foundations of ancient wisdom are intimately felt in the innermost depths of the being of each individual. They are part of the teachings of the outer circle of the ancient religion, and were given their true value in the heart of all great religious movements by their founders. Genesis, the fall of humanity, the deluge, the deifying powers, the sexual mysteries, the essence of the Savior, the cosmic Christ, the descent into hell, life after death, the return to paradise, the dimensions of nature, the existence of divine hierarchies, angels or devas, spirits between the creature and creator. The sum of knowledge on these themes, fruit of the direct experimentation of our predecessors, was fundamental in all past religions and civilizations. Nowadays, though the adepts of the modern religions may have a certain knowledge of these fundamental principles in which they have faith, Gnosis, being the inner circle of the great knowledge, has always aimed at answering numerous important questions that the exterior circle has left in suspense or that only addresses in a symbolic fashion. These questions are of a practical and metaphysical nature. We repeat, Gnosis has sought throughout the ages to unveil the key elements, conceptual and practical, so that the true and sincere seeker may in turn deepen their own path. Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, Krishna, Moses, Zoroaster, Lao Tzu, Fu Si, Quetzalcoatl, and many others have passed on exceptional oral teachings beyond time and space, which deserve to be known and truly understood today. The Bible, the Dhammapada, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Torah, the Zendavesta, the Tao Te Ching, the I Ching, the Popol Vuh, and so on, are writings without equal, filled with wisdom and splendor, the essence of the unique message permitting one to live a life filled with spiritual richness. And yet they are written in a symbolic language that allows different interpretations, and that is impossible to decode in its entirety without the universal principles of the great knowledge. But this universal teaching was not uniquely at the heart of religion. Like we stated earlier, it was supported by 4 pillars: the arts, the sciences, philosophy, and religion or mysticism. Formerly, these 4 aspects of life were not dissociated like they are today, but rather they were an integral part of daily life. Art, for example, was a vehicle for the universal consciousness. Its other main goal was to raise the vibratory state of the individual while bringing beauty and harmony to his or her living environment. We need only think of the sculptures, paintings, temples, music, and sacred dances of each epoch. As for ancient science, it may not have been as technological as ours today, but it took into account the other dimensions of nature and what is found there. This permitted a more global approach for the human being and its place within creation. In effect, the discoveries were better adapted to the needs of the individual and the environment. This is what the French doctor and poet Rabelais expressed when he said, "Science without consciousness is but the ruin of the soul." Let us think also of Einstein when he stated, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind." And the 4th pillar, philosophy, was equally united with the first 3. Let us take, for example, the living philosophy of Jesus, of Buddha, Krishna, or Lao Tzu, who were all known as great sages. Their philosophy, once properly applied to life on a daily basis, put into activity forces and unsuspected energies inside of us, like those we will study in the future conferences. We will explore in greater detail the philosophy of the present moment, the work on oneself, and self-knowledge. We will breathe life into the famous phrase written on the entrance to the Temple of Delphi that is also attributed to Socrates, "Man, know thyself." It is then when Shakespeare's "to be or not to be" will make sense. The Gnostic philosophy has always offered the same edifying and superior way of living. Let us pass now to the theme of practices, and of the schools of regeneration where they were taught. Since the highest antiquity, the quest for a Gnostic experience has led the human being to push the limits of the possibilities of the physical body. Still today, these possibilities are little known to modern science, despite promising recent attempts. This has not, however, prevented the people of the earth, since ancient times, from discovering numerous faculties that did not fail to leave their mark in history. We need only think of the numerous writings stemming from all the traditions and religions, filled with strange, mystical, and transcendental phenomena. In more recent times, the authentic paranormal phenomena, though many still doubt such things exist, are very real for those who have experienced them directly and for their witnesses. In fact, several groups of researchers are studying these phenomena today with great interest and scientific rigor. Soon, no one will be able to doubt the existence of the extraordinary faculties of the human body. Astral projection, conscious dreaming, the forces of nature, the powers of meditation, ancient yoga, sacred sexuality, mystical levitation, intuition, clairvoyance, superconsciousness. These belong to the occult science of the body, the soul, and the spirit. However, these uncommon faculties, as strange and grandiose as they may be, have never been the main goal of the ancient knowledge of the ancient peoples. They are rather the consequences of a quest far greater and more important, the regeneration and spiritual elevation of the individual, the intimate auto-realization of the being. In a certain manner, we can say that once the incorporated soul succeeds in purifying the inferior elements that inhabit the psyche and incarnates what is most divine in the individual, the body then develops faculties that are beyond what is normally known to be possible. The procedures and methods that have been proposed over the centuries in order to attain this awakening are numerous. Be it the ancient temples, the religious orders, the esoteric groups, the schools of meditation and of yoga, etc., they have all suggested concrete methods. It is through specific practices that the elements have been scientifically arranged by the awakened beings who have taught them to put the forces of the body into activity, as well as the forces of nature and of the cosmoses. Prayer, meditation, contemplation, ancient rites, divine invocation, all of these practices have a precise structure that places specific energies into activity within and around us. Contemporary Gnosis retransmits all the pieces of the ancient tradition by according an equal importance to the philosophical, devotional, and practical aspects. It is thus a global teaching of regeneration. Whether the practice be an oration, meditation, tantrism, a conscious dream, or even the discovery of self, contemplation of the present moment, a fast, a sacred chant, an act of piety or charity, love for our neighbor, etc., Gnosis becomes a living art, a science of the being. To reflect with wonder over the great metaphysical questions of life, to adore the divine in light of a superior knowledge, all within a sane and serene body that vibrates harmoniously. This is the goal of all practices. This is a fertile way of existing, of awakening our consciousness, and of being. The Egyptian, Mayan, and Aztec pyramids, the Hindu, Greek, and Buddhist temples, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, the Gothic cathedrals, the sanctuaries of nature, as well as the Christian churches, the mosques, the synagogues, and temples of prayer in all religions were places at the heart of which Gnostic knowledge was taught, wisely instructing the mind, the heart, and the body of the devotees of all ages. In the Middle Ages, the orders and brotherhoods, such as the Templars, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Kabbalists, the Alchemists, the Hermeticists, Knights, the Samurai, and martial artists, were just a few of the schools that carry the torch of this practical wisdom. And of course, all of the modern schools of spirituality, yoga, theosophy, Taoism, occultism, Sufism, the Fourth Way, Tai Chi, esotericism, and diverse meditations have also found pieces of this ancient initiatic tradition, and of which are a manifestation of this in our modern age. Gnosis accepts all of these and honors them. It explains and unifies them, provided they are authentic. Human dignity, via the revaluation and revelation of the ancient universal culture. This is our objective. We now continue by speaking briefly about the life and work of the founder of the contemporary Gnostic movement. Samael Aun Weor was an anthropologist, humanist, author, and contemporary public speaker who, in the last century, has had a considerable impact on the historical evolution of Gnosis. This is primarily due to two reasons. Firstly, because he demonstrated in an intelligible and systematic fashion, through a body of work that exceeds more than 60 books and hundreds of conferences, the uniqueness of the metaphysical knowledge he was unveiling. Secondly, because his work is invigorated by a well-articulated, practical didactic method based on his own personal experiences, and thus inviting the aspirant to experiment for themselves the postulates of the teachings. Samael Aun Weor was certainly not the first modern seeker to abound in this universal approach of knowledge and its applications. Let us note here, for example, such names as Mircea Eliade, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Max Heindel, Carl Gustav Jung, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, and Sri Ramakrishna. But we can say that in our time, his work and experience stands out amidst their wide scope, their depth and conceptual clarity. Born on the 6th of March 1917 in Bogota, Colombia, Samael Aun Weor began early on in life to demonstrate a particular interest in the quest towards the spiritual. Like many great mystics throughout history, he experienced unusual states at an early age, through which he witnessed certain universal truths. Furthermore, he claimed to be born with the particular faculty of astral projection, which permitted him throughout his life to directly investigate the great metaphysical questions and to verify the affirmations of the ancient peoples and religions on the spiritual world and what exists there. Thus, he sheds a particular light on a large number of questions that have remained in suspense to this day. Having left his parents' home in his early adolescence, he started traveling, always in search of his path. His research brought him, among other things, to the Theosophical Society of Blavatsky at the age of 17, and to the ancient Rosicrucian school of Krumheller at 18, where he became aware of the works of numerous authors, including the sacred scriptures of the diverse religions, ancient and modern, anthropology, science, philosophy, spirituality, esotericism, yoga, theurgy, theology, comparative studies. He read an impressive quantity of books and taught himself via the inherited knowledge of his predecessors. Practically speaking, his studies brought him to obtain interesting results, but he eventually grew tired of theory. At the age of 19, still driven by an insatiable thirst for enlightenment and truth, he withdrew to seek, as he called it, the inner master through deep meditation. An important fact to note is that it was at Krumheller's school that he heard talk of white tantrism, or supersexuality, a well-kept secret throughout the ages that's goal is to awaken the kundalini. He later came to call it the Great Arcanum, or sexual magic, and he publicly unveiled it. At 28, Samael Aun Weor met Arnolda Garro, the woman who became his spouse, and with whom he would spend the rest of his life. With a desire to share his knowledge and growing experience, he began to teach the local population of the Andes in Colombia where he lived. Thanks to his knowledge of healing plants, he also carried out a great deal of healings. It was during this epoch that he wrote his first books. In 1954, at the age of 37, he left Colombia on foot in direction of Mexico and settled down in the capital. Having already left behind him, from Colombia and Venezuela to Mexico, a considerable number of disciples and adepts seized by his knowledge and by his wide range of faculties, it is in Mexico City that he would come to actualize his impressive body of work, found the international Gnostic movement, and become known the world over. It is also here that he disincarnated in 1977. Samael Aun Weor lived primarily off of public charity during his entire life. Because he always taught free of charge and voluntarily abandoned his royalties to his books so that, as he said, even the poorest may have access to his writings, he himself often experienced poverty. At the end of his life, he even refused a monthly salary offered to him by the members of the movement. He advised those who attempted to glorify him to better apply themselves to the inner work, rather than wasting their time on vainly exalting his person. In this sense, he retransmitted an impersonal message that has always existed and that was not invented by him, in the image of other messengers who transmitted it before him. This message is based on what he calls the 3 factors of the revolution of the consciousness, and that can be summarized thusly. Psychological death, to profoundly change our psychology by auto-discovery, auto-observation, and the annihilation of our defects, in order to awaken the consciousness and the virtues. Birth in spirit, to develop the supernatural faculties of the soul through meditation, devotion, and white tantrism, and thus crystallize the superior bodies and incarnate the most divine part of us. Self-sacrifice, to love and to help our fellow humans, and to retransmit the universal teachings as well as perform charitable acts. Today, the work of Samael Aun Weor has been translated into several different languages, and we can find numerous subsidiaries and ramifications of the Gnostic movement on each of the continents. And now we will finish with a few words about the International Gnostic Movement. The MGI is a non-profit organization. Its varied activities are aimed at all those who seek a superior teaching, without distinction of race, gender, religious beliefs, or political views. The instructors are volunteers that come from numerous professional backgrounds, and that have participated in the advanced courses that we offer. Their mutual wish is to retransmit this universal wisdom while continuing their work on their own personal paths. The MGI encourages its members to exercise social aid and human fraternity. The current director of the MGI, Jean-Marie Claudius, has been teaching Gnosis for almost 20 years. Having been interested from a young age in the great civilizations and religions of the world, it is after having discovered contemporary Gnosis that he decided to share this universal wisdom with all those who are searching for a teaching that will concretely answer to the highest spiritual aspirations of the human being. It is this that brought him to travel and teach Gnosis in numerous countries, such as Romania, where he opened the first Gnostic centers of study, the United States, Canada, Spain, Costa Rica, Mexico, Peru, Thailand, India, Australia, Cameroon, and Congo. He has also trained instructors in Spain, Quebec, Cameroon, and Congo. It is in these last 2 countries that he offered instructor courses in Africa for the first time in the history of contemporary Gnosis. These courses were offered free of charge. It is following these instructor courses that the Gnostic teachings resulted in spreading across many African countries, thanks to the considerable efforts of the African instructors and the generous donations received from fundraising. Today we find numerous MGI Africa educational centers in Cameroon, Congo, Ivory Coast, Gabon, Benin, Togo, Chad, Central African Republic, and Burkina Faso. Other centers of the MGI are also present in other parts of the world. Throughout our numerous conferences, we unveil this astonishing culture present in the admirable works from around the world. We retransmit the means to permit each person, whom so desires, to find their own way, to live fully, and to harmoniously flourish through the awakening of their consciousness and faculties, thus communing with our inspired predecessors, as much through a superior vibratory state of the mind and emotions as by the material and spiritual realization of self. We also teach how to discover the hidden motives of human psychology, to find what is darkest within the individual, and that can be vanquished and transmuted into virtues, consciousness, and love. As did all those who, faced with their sorrows and inner misery, found the force to surpass themselves, to conquer themselves, and demonstrated how each individual can be great, that each person can make a difference. That the nobility of the heart is not acquired through social ranking, but rather by our actions and our deeds. That wealth does not depend on what we own, but on who we are and what we give. And that authentic happiness and harmony in the world do not come from the exterior, but rather find their source within us. It is through a vast spectrum of courses and esoteric and devotional practices, as well as advanced courses for those who wish to become instructors, that the MGI retransmits this teaching from the inner circle in a living and integral fashion. Here is a brief overview of certain important aspects that define and form a whole belonging to the three factors cited earlier. Concrete and efficient tools, so that the individual may discover and radically change their psychology in order for the same dramas and sufferings to stop being reproduced in their life, so that the individual may be changed and experience a growing peace and happiness through the annihilation of the psychological defects. A very ancient key, kept secret throughout the ages, for living one's sexuality in a different way, to return health to the body, and to create the internal or spiritual bodies. These bodies, astral, mental, causal, make a part of the occult anatomy, the human microcosm, and permit the person to live a richer, more complete life, while gradually reintegrating their place amidst the universal macrocosm. The science of the vibratory states that permits the aspirant to experience mystical joy on a daily basis and to relate themselves with what is most sublime in life, with the divine in all things, through diverse practices that allow the efflorescence of their interior perfection. The transcendence of the Christic energy present in all of creation, known in all cultures and religions of the world, and before which all of nature inclines itself in admiration, and the ancient wisdom needed to incarnate this energy, being the precise map or stages of the initiatic path of the sages and heroes of old. The means for all persons to attain auto-gnosis and to become themselves the source of knowledge, happiness, and wisdom. It is auto-gnosis that allowed the masters, the initiates of all eras, to speak to humanity of incredible and sublime phenomena. Concrete and diverse opportunities to practice sharing, self-sacrifice, and compassion, in order to come to the aid of our fellow humans and to those who are most in need. And so we study and put into practice the aspects that have always been present in the outer circle of the diverse schools and religions, and that we deepen in order to retransmit the essence belonging to the inner circle of the great temples that has been taught since the dawn of time by all masters to their disciples. Our intention is none other than to save from the wreckage of centuries this unique, extraordinary teaching that reveals the mysteries that surround us, priceless heritage of the peoples and generations to come, the desired result being a greater happiness in each individual. We invite all those that are thirsty for spirituality and mysticism, the devotees of all religions, schools, philosophies, lodges, yogas, to come drink from the fountain of the eternal and timeless Gnosis. Through this work, we seek to attain a growing harmony with our neighbor, with ourselves, and with the planet on which we live.